Hi, I'm Adam Natali, Director of SVA Theater at the School of Visual Arts. If you've never heard of SVA, we're a preeminent art and design college in New York City. Check the description below for more info. Since 2014, SVA Theater has hosted After School Special, the college's annual alumni film and animation festival. The festival is normally a series of free screenings followed by Q&As with alumni who are successfully working in the film industry. Even though we're unable to host in-person screenings this year, we're thrilled to be able to present interviews with over 25 alumni who've worked on a wide variety of feature films, television shows, documentaries, animated films, and more. Whether tonight's Q&A focuses on a particular series, film, or other work, we'll be sure to note it in the description below and will provide info on how to watch. All of our festival interviews will premiere here on YouTube during the week of September 21st. We're calling this our work from home edition of After School Special, and our guests are zooming in from all over the world, from Singapore and Germany to Canada and California. A full schedule of After School Special 2020 interviews can be found at svatheater.com, but all videos will remain on YouTube following their premieres. I hope you enjoyed tonight's interview, and if you're interested in viewing past After School Special Q&As, you can visit the School of Visual Arts' YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in, and fingers crossed, we hope to see you in person at an SVA Theater event in the near future. I'd like to welcome Paul Fox, who attended SVA as an undergraduate film student and whose thesis short, Last Round Up, won numerous awards and was invited to the Sundance Film Festival. Paul's first two features, The Dark Hours and Everything's Gone Green, received critical acclaim and accolades from festivals around the world. Paul has directed numerous episodes of the acclaimed Netflix drama Anne with an E, and his work has been featured on countless Canadian and American television shows, including Rookie Blue, Degrassi, The Next Generation, Workin' Moms, Frontier, Mary Kills People, Haven, and The Pinkertons, to name a few. His IMDb list is very extensive. We're especially excited to have Paul here with us this evening, as his credits include 18 episodes of Schitt's Creek, almost a quarter of the series, which aired its final season earlier this year on Pop TV. The season 1 episode, The Cabin, won Paul a Canadian Screen Award for Best Direction in a Comedy Program, and the show scored him 2 additional CSA nominations and 2 Directors Guild of Canada nominations. We're so thrilled to have him here, so let's welcome Paul Fox. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Adam, I'm good, thanks.
Thanks so much for being here. You're actually in Newfoundland right now, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'd first love to start with you telling us a little bit about your SVA experience as an undergrad film student.
Yeah, well, my brother had moved to New York, and I would go down and visit him, and his wife was a student at SVA, not in the film department. And my coming to SVA started mostly because I wanted a reason to move to New York City. I'd come down and visit them, and suddenly the idea of becoming a student seemed like my way in the door. And I'd already been a filmmaker. I mean, I'd been making my own films since I was 12, sort of little animated films and films with my friends. And so it was certainly the career I was working towards. But then the sort of the added carrot of New York City was sort of what brought me to SVA.
And you're originally from Canada?
Yeah, from Toronto.
And so your thesis film, everyone seems to have a funny or interesting thesis film story, and yours actually was quite a success and was invited to Sundance. Can you tell us a little bit about that film?
Well, it's going back a way, so I'll have to plumb my memory a little bit. It's a kind of a gritty little drama. We shot it a lot of sort of nights in the Lower East Side, and this is the Lower East Side of the late '80s. So it was kind of a little spooky sometimes, but it looked great. It was kind of, so it ended up having a little bit of that sort of Scorsese Taxi Driver vibe. I would say those are probably the influences on that film. It was kind of a cross between kind of a urban Martin Scorsese story and a Sam Peckinpah Western, if you can imagine that. And so, yeah, a lot of, my friends and I tromping around Manhattan at 2 and 3 in the morning, shooting these night scenes out on out on the street. But it was fun, and I'm still really happy with that movie. I haven't watched it in a while, but it did the festival run, and then as you pointed out, it went to Sundance Festival.
And so was that shot on 35 millimeter or what? You know, we're going back, so I assume it's film.
Yeah, it was 16 millimeter.
Okay.
And it was a very DIY kind of a project. You know, I don't know how they're sort of shooting, you know, film school project. I mean, it varies all the time, but, you know, we were very guerrilla. We had a small crew. We were sort of getting out, as I said, often at nighttime, just 2 or 3 of us. I shot a lot of it myself. My friend Jeff Grant, who was actually a screenwriting major, shot a lot of it. We kind of figured out things as we went along. So that kind of adds to its kind of gritty authenticity. You know, I know there were scenes out there where we needed, you know, and we didn't have a lot of lights or a lot of equipment to work with. Our version of a location scout was Jeff and I would go out with a light meter a few nights before shooting and find intersections where at 4 in the morning there was enough natural street lights or neon to give us I think we accepted it if it was too if the exposure was below, you know, well, it's been so long since I've done it. But if it wasn't too underexposed, we would choose it and then push it in the lab. But yeah, so we shot 16 mil. So as you can imagine, since a lot of it is shot slightly underexposed, it's very gritty and grainy looking. But it looks, you know, it sort of suited the subject matter.
You mentioned Scorsese. Was he sort of one of your directorial inspirations?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, there's a pizza parlor right around the corner from SVA. I mean, there was back in the day on 3rd Avenue, a pizza parlor. And my friends and I were in there one night, and Martin Scorsese's parents came in, and we were like as starstruck as you'd be seeing any movie star, you know, because they're so distinctive if you watch his movies, because they're often in his movies, you know, his mother in particular, but, you know, both of them are in Goodfellas. And as soon as they came in, and they obviously knew that it was like this banter, and you know, I often wish I'd gone up and said hello, but you know, I was just a little starstruck by the Scorseses.
Well, the memory of it lives on. So you graduated from SVA, and you know, did you immediately find yourself making your features and working on sets, or did it take a few years to get up to that place?
It took a little while. I mean, I sort of got back into editing more than anything. That's kind of how it was sort of a bit of my in. I think I got back to Toronto and started doing some assistant editing, and then sort of, you know, kept knocking on doors to get directing work and trying to develop my own features. The TV stuff took off before the feature stuff. There was a kids show called I Was a 6th Grade Alien. I think in the US it was called My Best Friend is an Alien. And it was, you know, half-hour kids show, and I knew the producer slightly, and she got this series off the ground. It was their first season, and they had 22 episodes, and I was just essentially phoning her and banging on her door every day to convince her to let me direct one of them. And she finally gave me episode 22 of 22 episodes. I think I just wore her down. I think in fact, she called top at me because it was her first series as a producer. And so she wanted to, you know, put her best foot forward too. And so to take a chance on a first-time director was probably not what she wanted to do, but I sort of leaned on her as an old friend and convinced her to finally give me one. And then, you know, as often happens, then I came back the next season and directed a handful of them, right? It's like you sort of do the first one and acquit yourself well, and then things start to roll from there.
And since then, you've pretty much exclusively been working in television. I mean, there's so many series, and both Canadian and American series, and of course some of those crossover as well. So, you know, within those 20 some odd years, has there ever been a project that you really loved working on, or that really propelled your career forward?
Well, I would say some of the more recent ones. I mean, I love doing Schitt's Creek and Anne with an E. You know, and early on, like I made a couple of features, and I sort of always sort of had hoped that you know, the features would sort of take off, and that the TV work would supplement the features. But it just kind of didn't work out that way. The TV stuff became kind of the guiding, you know, the guiding force, and that's been great. What I love about doing TV is the sort of the chameleon-like aspect of it. You know, every time I go out, it's either a, you know, it's a Western or a comedy or a cop show, and it's a whole different gang of people to work with and a different aesthetic. And so, you know, and I've been really lucky in that it's a business that often pigeonholes directors. You know, you're the cop show guy, you're the drama guy, you're the comedy guy. And I've managed to be sort of genre bounce. You know, I like to say I'm sort of like the Ang Lee of episodic TV, that I can do a little bit of, I've managed to be able to do a little bit of everything, which is really the way I like to keep it.
And you know, along with that, how do you feel that as television director, you put your stamp on the episodes that you're working on? Because, you know, a lot of times when you speak to TV directors, they often say, well, I'm sort of working within the aesthetic that was set by the showrunner or the pilot director, and you're working within that. It doesn't necessarily give you the freedom that your own feature might. But yeah. So how do you work within that and still, you know, be creative and assert your creativity?
Well, it is a bit of a trade-off. I mean, there's no doubt that on the 2 features that I did, that, you know, you have complete autonomy. But, you know, despite the fact that you're sort of often being sort of parachuted into an existing world, you know, the key cast is usually already in place, and there's certain aesthetic guidelines. There's still actually, I find, a lot of room to, a lot of wiggle room creatively. And again, it depends actually from show to show, you know, and producer to producer, showrunner to showrunner, how much, like, you know, Anne with an E is a show, Moira Wally Beckett, who was the showrunner of that, really wanted it to feel cinematic and liked her directors to bring all of that to it. You know, I've been on other shows where they'll say in prep, we really want this to be cinematic. And then the second day, they're like, where are the inserts and the close-ups? And it's like, oh. But more, I've been really lucky. Again, more often than not, that's not been the case. I've been given a lot of freedom. And Anne with an E was a case in point where I think Moira really liked to let the directors bring their thing to it and make it feel like make them feel like mini movies. The show that I'm doing here, this show in Newfoundland I'm doing, is I'm shooting the first episodes, I'm shooting the pilot, so I'm sort of involved with with the team of people sort of defining the aesthetic, defining the look, defining the style, and that's really fun and really gratifying.
So just because you mentioned Anne with an E a few times, you know, that's a Netflix / I think CBC show. And yeah. And so you've done quite a few episodes of that. It's based on Anne of Green Gables. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that series and your work on it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people are aware of the books, the Anne of Green Gables books, which are sort of famous Canadian books, and they've been adapted into series before. But Moira's take on it, and Moira was a producer and writer on Breaking Bad. This was kind of her dream project once that show wound up. And it's a kind of a grittier, darker Anne of Green Gables. I mean, she really wanted to make it, you know, more Bronte, less Disney, you know? So it's grittier, it's the scenarios are a little darker. It's like, what would life really be like for a young orphan back in the late 1800s in rural Canada? So what in sort of previous incarnations of the story, you know, Anne was always this kind of relentlessly cheerful little kind of Disney-like moppet. The take with this show was to sort of almost showed that her relentless cheerfulness, it was almost like PTSD from being kicked around from orphanage to foster home to foster home. And so it's definitely a darker take on it. It was interesting reading, the reactions from both fans of the book and fans of early versions of the series. They, either loved this new take on it or couldn't get behind it at all, but it certainly found its own audience. And I thought it was really terrific to do because, we'd sort of it was a little bit more like a Jane Campion movie than a Disney movie. It had real, we really went for a sort of a rawness to it and an edginess and a real cinematic quality to it.
Well, I'd encourage everyone to check it out on Netflix. And so, now I'd love to get into your work on Schitt's Creek. I mean, it's a huge phenomenon, and especially in its final season. I mean, I think people would have watched another 5 or 10 seasons of this show, but they chose to conclude it this year. And you mainly worked on the first 3 seasons.
Yeah.
But like I said, you know, you directed 18 episodes, which is almost a quarter of the entire series. So how did you come to work on that series? Is it mainly since you've just been working in Canadian television?
To a certain extent, although Eugene and Dan Levy did the hiring, because it was really a father-son project, and they were fairly adamant that they didn't want comedy directors, and I hadn't done a lot of comedy up to that point. You know, I'd been doing Rookie Blue, which is a cop show, and like, you know, a lot of stuff was sort of hour-long drama. But again, they wanted a show that didn't look like a sitcom. They wanted a director who was going to come in and focus on the story beats and the characters, and making it and not shooting it with a style that looked like a sitcom, and you know, and let the humor sort of bubble up from underneath. You know, don't be sort of, you know, pushing the punchlines and you know, adding the sort of invisible rim shot to every joke. And so actually, it was a friend of mine, Jerry Ciccaridi, who I think was the first of the directors hired, and then Jerry recommended that they meet with me, and yeah, I just chatted with them, and it seemed like a good fit, and yeah, we did a lot of it together. I said it's kind of then opened up this whole other, you know, because since then I did Working Moms, and then this show that I'm doing here has comedic elements to it. So there's been actually more, Schitts Creek has really kind of opened up that sort of comedy line, added it to my my color palette of types of shows that I do.
Well, like you said, you're sort of a journeyman now, and you know, you're doing all sorts of television now. You know, with Schitt's Creek, in listening to interviews with Eugene and Dan, especially, it seemed like a very sort of tight knit group on set. It didn't seem like a necessarily overblown production. I mean, would you say that was the on-set experience any more or less different than other shows you worked on?
I would say that it felt more tight-knit. You know, I mean, it helps that the sort of the cast is small, the town is small. There's something about that. You know, there's something about that the scope of the show isn't huge. So it kind of allows for a sort of an intimacy both on camera and off. You know, it does. And Eugene in particular is he's really wants a harmonious set. You know, he as a leader of a show, you know, knows everybody's name, every crew member from, you know, from one end of the spectrum to the other, and you know, come in, greet everybody. You know, he's pretty remarkable, and it just, frankly, it just makes everybody feel like they're part of the project and an important part of the project. You know, and I think that just goes a long way. It's funny. I was just talking to somebody here the other night about actor who came in and was a little bit a guest actor for one character, and came in and was a little bit of a diva to the makeup hair departments, and Eugene just wouldn't have it. He was just so pissed off, and you know, that character never returned. You know, it's just not the way he wants to run it. He wants people to come to work and enjoy the process and feel like they're all kind of working together to create something. So yeah, it's pretty great. It's a pretty great experience that way.
You know, the show, like I said, it's become a pop culture phenomenon, really. And they had a whole thing in Manhattan pre-pandemic where you could tour the set. It was sort of redone inside, and I mean, tickets sold out in like 2 minutes. It was crazy. Could you tell in working, especially in the early seasons of the show, how much potential the show would have, and could you sort of idealize that would go on to such sort of pop culture, you know, extremes?
You always idealize it and hope that it will, but I don't think, you know, we knew we were making something really terrific, but we never knew that it would go to the, I mean, it's almost unprecedented, the level to which it's gone, particularly for a, you know, a small Canadian production, right? I mean, I mean, it's just exploded. And, you know, and it didn't sort of happen right away either, right? The first few seasons, at least the first couple of seasons, kind of really into later airings, like maybe like after it started airing on Netflix, that people started to find it. So it was even more surprising then because it had already aired and been well received. It had sort of this devout following, but it was still like a cult following. It was still this kind of hardcore, you know, group of fans. But the lengths that it went to since have been really quite amazing.
Do you have any favorite memories from the set or anything that stands out in your mind?
I think some of the things we had most fun with, watching Eugene and Chris Elliott try and crack each other up was always pretty entertaining. Eugene was almost entirely unsuccessful at cracking Chris up, and because of that, tried really hard. And Chris could almost effortless crack up Eugene, so it was almost it was not a fair contest, but it was fun to watch you know, Eugene get in there and try and put Chris off his game. No, mostly just watching those people work. You know, I mean, Catherine O'Hara is remarkable and somebody who, you know, gives you something different all the time. I don't know if you remember an episode where they go to buy a used car, and well, there's an incident with like she and Eugene, and she sort of launched into this Cockney accent in the scene that I guess she hadn't warned Eugene she was going to do. And what you can sort of see in the scene, him sort of struggling to kind of continue to be the straight man while she kind of created this character with a limp and a Cockney accent while they go to try and buy a car. Because they were trying to play poor. They thought if the car dealer thought they had money, that they would jack up the price. So her idea is like almost like the car woman out of a Dickens novel. And and she kind of held on to that until we were rolling, which was pretty fun. We also had a night, I think it was in the first season, where they were all going to a party at Mutt's barn, and for whatever reason that night in Ontario, the June bugs came out en masse, and just, you know, and I don't know, they're like big bugs, and just like into the, you know, into Catherine's wig and down the back of Daniel's shirt, and it was and just on us, which it's funnier in retrospect. At the time it was kind of horrible, but there were some good takes of the cast reacting to having vanish down their clothing and disappear into their wigs.
You know, this show's probably a bit different than some others you've worked on, in that, you know, Eugene and Dan are the creators and also starring in the series. So, you know, what was that like in terms of your work on the show?
Well, it's certainly different than something like Anne. I mean, they have very strong, you know, they had very strong ideas about the show, probably more so as it went along. You know, like I think the first year was, you know, it was a little bit more like defining what it was. So, you know, trying things, seeing what worked, what didn't. You know, I think the first season we were even a little bit more loose, like a little more handheld aesthetic, and we kind of moved away from that as we got into subsequent seasons. So, but you know, there are certainly people who have very strong vision of what their show is, and you know, you sort of contribute what you can, but a lot of it is you go along for the ride, and which is a pretty fun ride.
That's great. So, you know, moving on from that, we mentioned you're in Newfoundland and you're shooting the pilot of a show. I know it has been announced, so it doesn't have to remain confidential. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
Yeah, it's a show called The Surrealtor. It's funny tonally. It's a horror show, but it's also a comedy, but a very dry comedy. And the horror is really, you know, played straight. It's scary. It's about a real estate agent whose niche market is selling haunted houses that can't otherwise be sold. And it actually stars a couple of the Schitts Creek alums. The lead is Tim Rozon, who played Mutt, who lived in the barn. And Sarah Levy, Eugene's daughter Sarah, is the co-lead. And yeah, it's really fun. We haven't started shooting yet. We're still in prep, so we're driving around Newfoundland looking for various haunted-looking houses and just kind of daily meetings or how to levitate people and how to do this, and it's really fun. It's fun material to work with, and directorially to sort of sit down with the camera department or the special effects department and try and figure out fun ways to create this, the supernatural it's really fun.
And is it known what network or platform will be airing this?
Yes, Sci-Fi.
Oh, great. Okay, so we're thinking it'll probably come out sometime in 2021? That's
what I would think, because they're shooting it sort of right up to Christmas, so that'll be 2021.
Great. And you said, so I assume that you've been prepping for this show during the pandemic while things were shut down? Yeah.
I came out here, I was in Los Angeles, and then I came here, and we went into 2 weeks of quarantine, everybody coming here. I think one of the reasons we're shooting in land is that the province has, at the moment, 0 cases of COVID and hasn't had a new case in 17 days, I think, or something like that. It's kind of remarkable. So we all came in, as will all the incoming cast. Everybody comes in and does a quarantine, and then we're at it. But it's definitely the, we're the canaries in the coal mine in some ways, and that we're learning, as is everybody who's getting back up and running in film production, what works, what doesn't, what we need to do. We're definitely really erring on the safe side. It's there's a lot of protocols in place. We get our temperatures tested every morning as we go to work. We wear our masks. And we're figuring it out and learning new stuff and listening to what's happening on other productions around the country and what's working and what's not. And so it's it adds another wrinkle to the whole thing. There's no doubt about it. But it's great to be back working and making stuff again. I think we're all just, we do a lot of this, like a lot of our meetings where we used to sit around the big boardroom table. We do a lot of Zoom. Even when we're in the same building, if we're at the studio, I'm in my room and maybe the DP's in his office down the hall, but we're all connected, on a 20-screen Zoom. I mean, right now I'm at my home here, and but we've had meetings all morning.
And well, you showed me the view earlier, but let's show our viewers your view out your window quickly, because it is pretty stunning.
So yeah, one of the other perks of shooting outside, away from home, this the harbor, the Newfoundland harbor, and you can see the ships that come and go out there. So I mean, that made quarantine really a lot easier to have that view, and there's a deck out there. So I spent sort of 14 days, out there watching my yoga classes, and that kind of kept me.
So beyond this show, which, like we said, is about to start filming and will likely come out next year, do you have other projects lined up, or is everything still on hold for now?
Everything's pretty much on hold, yeah. And, my guess is that that sort of job-to-job nature of the business will kind of continue for a while. It's hard for people to plan very far ahead. It's so yeah, I just know I finished this at the end of October, and we'll see what happens and what the nature of the business is. It's it's interesting. There's certainly I'm used to at least having a couple of things booked, so I sort of know what my year looks like, and that's definitely not the case. But I'm sure, I know that's much the same in almost any business.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's good that you're finally back up and running and in what seems to be a very safe place to be filming, and they're taking the right precautions. So even though we're in a spot that's very much on hold, and a lot of people, especially students who have just graduated, who are looking to get involved in the industry, this is a really difficult time. But, with respect to that or not, could you provide any advice to students or to recent grads who are looking to get their start in this industry?
Well, it is tricky to know specifically what to do, except to stay at it. It's funny, like I think even when I came out of film school and was getting into it, there were people who were like, you know, the business is dead, don't get into it, you know, it's too hard now. I think it's just, people are just always going to tell you that. There's just going to always be different challenges. And there's always a need for content. People want to watch stuff, people want stories. So I think we'll all figure out over the next year or so what the new parameters are for telling stories and how it works and where we watch them. But if anything, I think there's going to be an increased demand for content, for stories. So it's just, I'm not entirely sure what the way in is, the way in at the moment. Yeah, except I guess just make things. I mean, that's sort of more, you know, I just sort of, both before going to SVA, during SVA, and since, is no matter what, just kept making films, whether they're short films or features or television stuff. And I think just do that and try and get stuff seen, and hopefully that'll kind of get the momentum rolling.
Sure. Well, and let me ask, you know, because you know, one of the ways that that recent grads and younger artists find a way in is, you know, like being a production assistant or something like that. And with the show that you're on now, because of the pandemic, has the crew been reduced at all, or is it generally about the same amount of people that are on set?
It seems, I haven't noticed any difference. It seems like all the same roles are necessary and filled. Yeah, no, I would say it feels like, it feels about the same. I may feel differently once we go to camera, but so far, you know, in prep and in all our sort of Zoom meetings, it seems like all the same roles are being filled, and there's somebody there representing all those different departments. So it feels like business as usual in that sense, you know, not so much in other ways, but certainly in that sense, it feels like the same roles are being done in the same way, and the same question. I'm being asked all the same questions as a director. Yeah. That slowed down.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you're working, and we'll keep an eye out for this series. The name again is The Surrealtor?
Yeah.
And so that'll be on Sci-Fi hopefully in 2021. And I hope things get back to normal for you and everyone else soon. I hope that this is semi-close to normal, at least, working on this show. And I wish you the best of luck with the experience. And thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. And I hope you stay well, and we'll keep an eye out for all your work in years to come.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks for being here, Paul. Thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this Q&A, and hope you'll check out our other after-school special videos on the School of Visual Arts' YouTube channel. Thank you for your interest in and support of SVA and its alumni, and for your support of the arts in general. Stay safe, stay healthy, and be well.